Hello Art 1-2, welcome to your skin shading demonstration. So before I start, I usually like to look at what range of value my skin is. And I'm gonna use that value worksheet to compare. So if I'm gonna start like in this area of his face. Although I will say, if you're a little uncomfortable starting to shade the skin, you could do the clothing first. And so the video for clothing is there. You could do that one first. If you mess up in the clothes, it's not that big of a deal. So if you feel uncomfortable, shade your clothes first. All right, then if I'm looking at his jawline, I'm gonna kind of bend my picture a little bit and not fold. I would say it's like a 2. So I might use a little bit of 2B, although below the neck, that is close to a 5 right there. So this might help you kind of determine what pencil to use for your skin. For her skin, sorry, I did not take off that grid yet. If I was gonna start, I usually start in a large area like along there. I would say maybe about between a 3 and 4, I would say. But I usually start with a 6B because the 6B is smudgier. And you're gonna start in your darkest parts first. So something to remember, you need a piece of paper to go underneath your hand. You need newspaper padding. And that's really to help the skin be very, very smooth. And then I did sharpen my pencils, but not too sharp. And the layers that you need to use, I would say like 2 to 3 layers, but your third layer is really just perfecting. Or if you have darker skin or a lot of shadow, you might have to do like, 3, 4 layers to kind of build up your shadow areas. So however many it takes is how many layers you do. All right, I am going to start in with a little bit of 6B. I'm going to start in on the neck area because I feel like if I mess it up, it's okay. So I am analyzing super closely, like how light is the chin compared to the neck skin underneath it. So along this edge, much darker, kind of fades out. Okay, so I'm getting a clean edge, and I'd say along this edge in general, it's slightly darker, but I'm not gonna outline, I'm just gonna put value along that line. Fading up into his ear. Okay, so then I have my guidelines to kind of go by. So circular motion, but it's darkest right underneath. So I'm gonna do a little extra layer right underneath. And I'm gonna hold my pencil more horizontally and in the middle so I can use this side of the graphite. Okay, I would say a little bit along here with the 6B, but I'm not pressing very hard. And then I'm going to switch to 2B. So I start with the darkest values first. Okay, and then in this area I'm going to kind of fade out with gentle pressure to get rid of that outline. Okay, actually I do think it goes a little bit darker over here. Okay, so then the only parts that are gonna stay the white of the paper, even if your skin is very, very light, I look at what is the whitest part though. For him, it's like the shiny part in the eye and some parts on the teeth, maybe like a little bit of highlight on his nose. That's gonna stay the white of the paper. Although if you have lighter skin, like Charlotte, even though she's very light, her eyes and like the highlights are the only true white parts. So for her, I would use 2B on this side of the face, and I would use more 6B on this side of the face. So for him, I'm gonna use more 6B on this side, and then 2B more on that side. For slightly darker skin tones, I'm still going to use 6B on like this part of her face, and then more 2B on the forehead, but 6B definitely over here to get those darker values. So you probably have to switch between pencils. Okay, so I have my 2B. Okay, so the first layer is the most important layer. You do want to take your time. I'm kind of looking at how he has a shadow underneath his earlobe that has a shape to it. Okay, looking at the side of the neck where it's slightly darker. And then I'm just going to fade that in, even though just the side is slightly darker. This part I'm going to fade in. And I am going to go over my 6B, so I'm layering my 2B on top of my 6B in the shadow part. Oh, and I totally missed a shadow. All along the clothing. So that has a definite shape to it. So I'm just going to be really careful when blending to keep that shadow where it goes, and it kind of fades out. Okay, so here it's fairly light, so I'm going to kind of leave that area alone a little. So I'm definitely holding my pencil more towards the end and horizontally, so I can use very little pressure. Okay, and then I'm noticing like here it's slightly lighter, so I'm going to kind of avoid that part. My blender is going to do the work for me. Okay, add a little bit of value over here. And so the key is to get it as smooth as you can by hand. Okay, so then I'm going to use my medium blender. So you have new blenders for this project. So you have small, medium, and large. I save the small one for around the nose, mouth, eyes, glasses, ears. So medium is what you're going to want to use more of to start out with. And I'm going to keep the shape of the shadow at first. So that I'm being careful not to really touch the edge as best I can. Okay, then I'm gonna blend out my midtones or along the edge of the shadow part. And so you can touch your paper. I'm touching it in the border to hold it in place, and then I'm covering up where my arm is resting or my sleeve. So circular motion, using more of the whole side of the blender. Okay, so I want to do some smaller circles in multiple directions. So circular motion, multiple directions to get it to look smooth. And then I kind of blend over the shadow part to pick up some of that graphite. And then you're going to just use the blender to fade in some of your lighter values. And so that's why it's really important to erase your grid completely so that you don't see the grid showing through. I'm just making sure. And at the very end, we will go back and kind of do some refining with mechanical pencil later on. Okay, so then I look at how this needs to fade out a little bit more. So I'm going to do a little bit more with my blender. Okay. Then I would switch and take my larger blender, and I would do slightly larger circular motions, but less pressure, because this is really to kind of just do a once over with the blending. And if you can't get it all the way to the edge, then of course use your medium or small. Like I'm going to use the smaller one, like right along the edge in there. Okay, so what I notice is that his side of his cheek is slightly lighter than here. So that means I'm going to use even less pressure. Like barely any. But I'm noticing that the top of the cheek here is lighter than it is here. So I definitely want some value. Okay, it's slightly darker along this side where it meets the ear, up into the hair. So I'm going to pull some value up into the hair so the hair overlaps it. And I would say for people who struggle with ears, but I just look, don't think of it as an ear. I just look at like the range of value. There it's darker, along this edge is darker, fading out, the shape of that value. So don't think of the ear as an ear. Okay, so now I definitely want to start fading out. Doing more of the side of the cheek, and I'm going to leave the top of the cheek alone. And that's pretty much all I'm going to fade out. So if it looks liney in one direction, add a layer in the other direction. All right, so now here's where his skin like creases right there, and I'm getting into some of the darker parts. So I'm just going to use a little more pressure and kind of fade that out into what I have. Okay, so in here, I'm kind of going along with my value map, and I'm analyzing my picture, my photograph. I feel like over here is pretty dark for 6B, but I do want to fade this out. I'm almost ready to switch pencils for 6B. Oh, actually, I'll put that in with 6B actually. Okay, underneath. So avoid the nose. The nose is a separate demonstration, but you can do the skin kind of around it, and then you'll definitely perfect when you do the nose. So skin would be hands, face, neck, arms, if your arms are showing. I'm gonna fade that out a little bit. Okay, so then I'm going to switch to 6B, and I'm looking at the shapes of the shadow. So I'm looking very closely how it's really dark underneath the lips. So I'm going to go along the edge to get a clean edge. Okay, fade down to my guideline. Okay, then he has a core shadow that curves on his chin. And the bottom edge of his chin is dark. So I'm going to go along that edge, fade up. So we don't want it to look outlined. So if you do have a darker edge, fade it up into the skin. And then it's slightly lighter over here, so I'm going to lighten up my pressure. Fading a little bit along that edge. Okay. I'm going to do this side. Okay, 6B. So along the nostril it's darker. So I'm going to go along the edge and then fade out. So it's pretty dark in here, so I'm going to have to build up some layers, but and then he has, which I didn't draw on there, he has this like crease of skin. So if you see something, add it as you're going. Like if you didn't add it before, add it now. It kind of fades out. All right, so over on this side, it's darker along the edge of the nostril. Fading along that crease. Okay, so I'm looking at underneath the nose, it's darker. Right underneath. And then in general, this is a darker side over here. So he does have like a slight lighter value there. So I'm going to kind of go around to that part. Okay, so the skin on this side is darker than the skin on this side. So therefore, I'm going to do a thin layer, and I'm going to take my time to get a good smooth layer with clean edges. So if your skin is darker toned, then you are probably just going to have to do a whole layer, but avoid the light parts. So for hers, I would avoid this whole curvature. I'd probably avoid this part of the forehead. Actually, I do 2B for her forehead. For this, obviously, I would totally avoid that part. So even if your skin is darker toned, avoid the light parts. Or if it's in shadow, still avoid the light parts. So I definitely like do all this. I'd fade out into my midtones, but I would avoid this part. And for some people, you have kind of learned and you've gotten pretty good about just adjusting your pressure for the pencils. So if you want to use just 6B, you can. Just adjust your pressure. All right, so I'm going to pretend like his glasses are not there. Just going to go around them, and then it's one of the last things we'll actually add. Okay, and then I look at how, oh, we actually have a shadow coming down. So you don't have to get too close to the eye because we will do eyes and we'll kind of refine. So I'm kind of just going to fade up into the eye area. For like this one, if I was doing this side of her face, I would just kind of fade up into this area knowing I'm going to come back onto the nose. So for this one, I would do the cheeks and I just kind of fade up into the nose part knowing I'm going to come back and refine and actually shade that nose. Okay, so even on this dark side, he has a slightly lighter area. So I'm going to kind of avoid that part. I'm going to do a once over underneath his eye, but knowing that we're going to come back. And I'll just fade that up and we'll refine that value. Okay. All right, looking on the outside of his glasses, he has a little bit of a shadow. Inside. And I'd say there is a little bit of a shadow like underneath. And then inside his glasses are a little bit darker. So I'm really looking at the shape and how it fades out. So that kind of fades out. Okay, so for his forehead, if you have wrinkles or creases, then I would do that first. So this one kind of fades, and I'm just going to go along the line because you guys shouldn't have any, I mean, he has some sharp one just because of his crazy face, but if you're just like raising your eyebrows or something, you might have like a slight crease. So just kind of lay it on there a little bit. or slight indentation in the face. Okay, so then looking at his forehead, this side is darker. And I'm going to just kind of I'm going to blend over the eyebrows anyway, and then we'll just add them back in on top. So I'm just going to kind of go along the edge a little bit, knowing that I'm going to use this graphite to pull over to the lighter part of the forehead. So this is with my 6B. I feel like there's like another slight wrinkle. Okay, so there's definitely going to be some refining. Start with medium blender first. And I usually go over the darker parts that are slightly darker. So I'm going to go over that part, circular motion. I'm going to go over this part, circular motion. Turn it so your arm is comfortable. I'm going to slightly adjust. Okay, so right here I can kind of see like a grid line. So I'm going to try to pull that out, and then hopefully when I blend back over it, it will go away. Or if you see fingerprints while you're doing this, you might have to kind of blend over them. And then erase out and then blend over them again. Or erase out first if you can actually see them. Okay, so in the core shadow, I'm going to keep the shape of the core shadow when blending the first time. So notice how it's kind of shapy. Thoroughly blended. Okay, then I'm going to go back and kind of fade back out. Kind of blend over my shape again. And I like to clean as I go, so I actually got a little bit there. Okay, fading along the edge, and then blend over. Okay, I'm gonna get right up to his lip line. I blended in the shapes. Now I'm going to go back and blend over all the skin. Okay, so over here he starts getting fairly light. Just want to soften that shadow a little. Plus I'm going to pick up some of that graphite to move over. So I'm definitely holding this super horizontal to where I can use the whole side of the blender. I'm kind of curving along the cheek edge a little bit. So once you do a good layer with the medium blender, then you're going to come back with the larger blender, especially on like cheeks. You know, obviously if it's a small area, this doesn't work very well for you, but then I can just create the tone of the skin with the medium and smaller, or sorry, medium and larger blender. So I'm just going to kind of blend over the glasses right there so the skin inside and outside is about the same. And then that creates his lighter skin there. So remember, you shouldn't be pressing very hard with the big blender. It's easy to like flatten the paper and then, you know, you can't erase out anything. All right, so then part of the skin is going back and refining. So I'm going to add another layer in here. And I like to kind of refine as I go so I don't have so much to do in the end. I would use my mechanical pencil to get clean, crisp edges, but not outlining. So along here, it's darkest. So I'm going to crispen that up, then fade out into my 6B. Or like under here, I'll probably go with my mechanical and fade out into what I have. And then using my medium blender. I try not to touch the edge with the blender, especially in the dark parts. Okay, so definitely go back and add another layer to the dark parts, like I'd add another layer with the mechanical pencil to that shadow part. All right, so then part of refining the skin, which I'm going to show you on the chin here, is taking a second look. And so I kind of noticed like, oh, it's a little bit darker in this bottom part. Let's see. I feel like this part kind of curves down a little bit more, or curves a little bit more. This one I have a little bit more of a line showing underneath the lip, and it kind of curves up a little. I'm going to do another layer underneath the lips. I feel like it's pretty dark. Kind of fades out. And I'm going to do another layer. This is with my 2B. So I don't want it to get a lot darker. I just want to kind of fix it. Okay, so then you're just going to blend in the areas that you added more layers. And so that's the big difference between a B and an A, or sorry, a and a B and a C, is kind of coming back and doing another layer where needed. I'm just going to kind of blend over that. Okay, so part of refining is pulling back out the lights. Do you guys have, hold on, let me find it in my baggie. Oh no, I can't find it in my baggie. I can't find a new one in my baggie. No. Okay, finally, thank you. We have a new eraser to use. So you can use this on the self-portrait and the PBA. It's this gray one. This is called a kneaded eraser. You can use it for anything powdery, but for this class, just use it for the pencil, and then later if you want to use it for stuff, you can. So peel off the plastic. And I would not play with this very much, and as soon as you're done using it, put it back into the Ziploc bag. Like, put it back into your Ziploc bag. Because this will get on the carpet or floor and it picks up whatever. You'll get hair in it, pencil shavings, and then it gets all disgusting. I also wouldn't, like, yeah, you can stretch it. It's self-cleaning, so when it's dirty, you just kind of stretch it to clean it. You can also form it into little points. You can, like, get into tiny areas. And I use it to kind of lift out layers. So it's not like a true eraser, because it won't erase everything, but it lifts off the graphite. But if you play with it too much, you get too much oil and bacteria in here, and then it just falls apart. So please be careful. Okay, so I'm going to make it into like a nub. And I'm going to pull back out the light parts in the chin that I like kind of over blended onto. So I'm going to kind of draw back in. So I'm using it to draw with. Draw back in those light parts. I'm going to tap it along the edge to fade out. And that's okay. I feel like it still needs to be like a little bit lighter. So I'm not pressing very hard, and I am going to go back and blend over this. that needs to be a little lighter, but also there's a little bit of a lighter piece of skin along the edge of that. And the top of his cheek over here, I'm gonna pull out. Ideally my whole cheek was done before doing that, but I can pull out a little bit. And then usually what I do is I save, okay, so one end is dirty, and I save the other end to just kind of gently go over. Where it makes it more subtle once again. Or you can use the end of your medium blender to kind of get it to fade out a little bit more. All right, so I do think I'm gonna fade out a little bit more. Or, I still feel like this needs to fade down a little bit. So I'll probably fade that down a little bit more. All right, so over here and on the nose as well, you would use this, but make sure that you keep the shape of your shadow. So here I'm kind of avoiding the light part, and then gently kind of blend over to fade it back out. And then if it needs to be even lighter, I'm just gonna blend over the glasses. So this side, I can't really use my big blender because it's too small of a space. But then I can use the kneaded eraser, making a nub. I'm gonna kind of blot back out. And so for her, I would blend over like all of her face, then in here I'd come back and use the kneaded eraser. Like along the edge of the nose, underneath the eye, that highlight on the forehead, which is hard to see for you guys, but I definitely pull that back out. For hers, especially she has some value here, but I would use the kneaded eraser to pull back out there. A little bit of the highlight on that part of the chin, on the edge of the chin. So you're going to use your kneaded eraser to pull back out where the light parts are. And when it gets dirty like that, you can just kind of stretch it and fold it over. And then you have a clean area to use. So again, don't play with these because they fall apart. And be careful because little kids like these. It gets stuck in the carpet. It does not come out of the carpet. You have to be very careful. So when you're done using it, put it back in your baggie of supplies and put your supplies in a safe location. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to show, like when we do the noses, I'll show you the finished kind of version, and I'll show you a little bit of refining, like along edges, etc., to fix it before moving on. All right, I'll see you in the next video. So if you have clothing, that would be clothing, or if you've already done clothing, excellent, you're going to move on to the nose.